Hello and welcome to another Satchel webinar. My name's Hannah and I'm a product evangelist for Satchel. I'm going to be your host today as we explore some initiatives and tactics that you can use to reduce teacher workload. We're going to be looking at the 5 biggest culprits of adding to teacher workload and talking through the ways that we can reduce the impact that they have on your day-to-day life. As always, you'll be sent through this video at the end of the webinar, so don't worry if you're unable to make this live or stay for its entirety. Also, you'll be receiving our Reducing Teacher Workload Toolkit, complete with free resources that will help you to implement some of the ideas that we discussed today. So without further ado, let's get into it. Teacher workload is a worldwide epidemic. The teaching crisis has consistently ranked workload as one of the main reasons why teachers give up the profession. It's also been linked to the development of health issues and is making it much harder for schools to retain valued teachers. Satchel have been building time-saving school software since 2011. Prior to that, our CEO Namish was an assistant head teacher and experienced firsthand how the workload crisis has affected schools. Using information from the Department of Education, as well as our experience working with over 1,600 schools globally, we created our Reducing Teacher Workload Toolkit and wanted to share it with you via this webinar. Each section is paired with actionable advice and resources that teachers can instantly apply to help them deal with excessive workload. The Government Workload Survey for educators identified the biggest culprits when it came to adding to teacher workload. First we had behaviour, then marking and feedback, data management, curriculum planning and resources, and communication. What's most surprising about the increasing workload facing teachers is that it comes at a time when EdTech innovations are more readily available than ever. Throughout this webinar, we'll explore how software, like our learning platform Satchel One, can help to address the workload problem for some of these areas, as well as practical offline practices that can be applied too. So, let's start with behaviour. Managing student behaviour is one of the most difficult, time-consuming and mentally rigorous parts of a teacher's job. Having to control a group of students who all react differently to different forms of discipline and recognition is a task within itself, one which has led to 70% of teachers considering leaving the profession and over a quarter of mental health issues in teachers. That's not to mention the physical time that teachers have to attribute to behaviour management, which puts more of a strain on their well-being and their work-life balance too. So, we're going to look at the key issues that are impacting on teacher workloads when it comes to behaviour. First up, detentions. After-school monitoring of detentions eats into teachers' time, as does physically logging detentions in the school system. This can leave some staff struggling to align themselves with the school's behaviour policy. In-school exclusions. Exclusion rooms require additional work for students to do when they've been separated, as well as constant monitoring. This is a drain not only on staff numbers, but also on teachers' overall workload. Contacting parents and carers. We're going to cover the impact of contacting parents and carers in the communication section later in this webinar, but these communications are usually triggered by behavioural incidents that parents need to be made aware of. Third parties and action plans. Action plans, risk reduction plans and incident tracking obviously require further work for teachers and SLT. Often third parties are drafted in to help, meaning more meetings and more time spent on paperwork. Disruptions in class. Disruptions in class often interrupt even the most carefully written plans and can negatively impact on students' learning. This obviously takes up precious lesson time and adds to teacher workload after the class, as they are forced to then revise existing lesson plans in order to make up for the lost time caused by those disruptions. So, how can we reduce the impact of behaviour management on workload then? Prevention is key here. The idea is to promote positive behaviour in order to stop excessive negative and disruptive behaviours from occurring. Here are some simple but effective ways of managing behaviour. A behaviour policy. The most effective way to ensure positive behaviour management is to have a well thought out and correctly implemented behaviour policy that all staff are willing and capable of upholding. There are some key components of a behaviour policy. Make sure that it's easily accessible for all stakeholders. It should be reviewed annually and updated in line with new concerns, practices and ideas. It should have clear, detailed instructions on how behavioural ideas should be escalated. Behavioural issues, sorry. And it must outline the consequences of poor behaviour. Also, we need to be crystal clear about what is classified as poor behaviour, so there's no room for ambiguity. We've actually included our behaviour policy checklist in our toolkit, which is a useful guide for those who are creating a new policy or want to ensure that their current policy is covering everything you need it to. You'll be sent a copy of that at the end of this webinar. Next, we want an online, centralised praise and detention system. Opting for an online praise management system which is used across the school helps to ensure consistency, and it makes tracking easier for SLT. The system can also be used to enforce your school's behaviour policy through giving points and recognition in line with your guidelines. Also, the promotion of merits, badges and house points helps to create a positive school culture, one that students are happy to be a part of. But in order to avoid duplicate data input, ensure you find an online system that syncs with your MIS and provides right back. Satchel One's Behaviour app is the perfect addition to any school that wants to gain better control of student behaviour and help to reduce the amount of time teachers spend monitoring and dealing with in-class disruptions. It can easily award praise in line with the school's policy from the front of the class, and right back to Sims ensures there's no duplicate data input. Next, be aware of behavioural issues. Communicating with your SENCO will make you aware of the students who need additional support, how to identify these behavioural issues in other students, and how best to approach them. Another resource that you'll receive at the end of this webinar is our SEND help sheet, which outlines key SEND conditions and their characteristics so you can clearly identify and cater for students with those needs. Next, clear processes. Unfortunately, no matter how good your school's behaviour policy is, detentions are inevitable. To help reduce the impact of time spent after school supervising students, consider paying teachers time back in lieu. In addition to this, enforce a clear escalation process from teacher to SLT and provide newly qualified teachers with additional training and support at the start of their career to avoid the development of poor behaviour management skills. So, moving on to marking and feedback. Providing students with valuable feedback is critical to their success. However, marking student work is cited by teachers as one of the biggest contributors to their workload. In fact, 73% of school teachers reported spending too much time marking student work. That's almost 3/4 of our teachers. Many schools fall into the trap of over-marking student work, clouded by the misconception that providing written feedback for every piece of work adds value for the student, when in fact that isn't always the case. If teachers aren't able to cope with the amount of marking and feedback they have to complete, how do we expect them to manage everything else that the job entails? So, let's look at exactly when marking and providing feedback can negatively impact on teachers' workload. First of all, when marking is done only to appease SLT and Ofsted. There's often pressure on teachers to mark a certain way because of SLT's preference and as a result of myths surrounding Ofsted inspection. These misconceptions mean that the physical act of marking and certain marking techniques are blown way out of proportion. This then leads to a marking policy that doesn't benefit teachers, students, or the school's Ofsted rating. Next, when marking doesn't actually add value. When teachers feel pressured to mark and give feedback beyond what they see as necessary, they are likely to lose sight of the real purpose of marking and do it merely for the sake of it, which can detract from its value. This poses a very real problem. If feedback doesn't add value, students can't learn from their mistakes and progress. Next, when teachers always use written feedback. Using only written feedback exclusively can stagnate learning for students. It's also more time consuming for teachers as it requires more physical writing than any other techniques. Whilst written marking has its merits, marking everything by hand is slow, inefficient, and nonsensical. More interactive marking methods can also be used, not only to reduce the amount of work a teacher has to do, but also to make learning more exciting for students and create a better classroom environment. So how can we reduce the impact of marking and feedback on workload? We need to introduce alternate marking techniques and new ways of delivering feedback to students. Let's explore quicker marking techniques. There's no disputing that marking and feedback help students succeed. but it's important that we use the most effective techniques in order to reduce workload and maintain quality. There are a multitude of feedback techniques that are much less time intensive than traditional marking feedback in books, like verbal feedback, live marking, selective or focused marking, whole class feedback sheets, and peer marking too. These are all valuable marking and feedback techniques, all of which can help to reduce the strain on teacher workload. We've also included a whole class feedback template in our toolkit, which is a proven time saver for teachers, so if you haven't tried this method before, you should definitely give it a go. Set the record straight. So once and for all, let's clear up the misconceptions that people have surrounding Ofsted and marking and feedback. Many schools have fallen into the trap of believing that Ofsted expect marking to be conducted in a certain manner at specific intervals, when in fact this is not the case. Here's a direct quote from gov.co.uk. Ofsted does not expect to see any specific frequency, type, or volume of marking and feedback. These are for the school to decide through its assessment policy. So, for anyone who is still conforming to imaginary Ofsted assessment criteria, now is the time to stop. Next, remind yourself and your staff of the purpose of marking and feedback. The purpose of marking is to help students progress and to inform teachers of what needs to be covered in future lessons. Marking should, in one way or another, add value to teaching and learning, direct students on how they can improve, and provide teachers with insight into students' understanding of a topic or subject, so they can adjust plans and materials accordingly. Communicate this to your staff and remind them that if they ever find that the marking they are doing isn't meeting the purposes, then they should revise their assessment strategy. Next, don't be afraid to change habits. When introducing work reduction initiatives, which includes asking staff to stop what might be a career-long practice, it can be difficult and daunting. Don't be afraid to tell your staff to stop marking. The impact of them reducing time spent on unnecessary tasks will only better them as a teacher and allow them more downtime, preventing teacher burnout. To help implement these rules, create a new policy if needs be, and lead by example. Your staff are more likely to follow suit if you make the first move. We hosted a wellbeing coffee morning a little while ago now, and the message, what resonated with all of our delegates, was exactly this. In fact, Deputy Head and Wellbeing activist guest speaker John Tate said the following: "We don't want you marking books because you think we want to see it, because we don't anymore." The more aware we are of the myths surrounding marking, the more SLT are recognising that it isn't the be-all and end-all, and teachers need to recognise this too. Next, embrace online grading technology. Technology has the ability to enhance and streamline marking techniques that may already be quicker than written feedback. For example, online gradebooks and auto-grading quizzes and assignments can help take the physical marking effort out of the equation, leaving teachers with results which provide them with information they really need, which is whether or not students are making progress. Show My Homework provides auto-graded quizzes and spelling tests that, once set, will be marked by the software, saving precious time and effort for busy teachers. Data management is another big strain on teacher workload in the UK. Thanks to the advancement of technology, there's more data than ever before. In fact, more data was created in the last 2 years than in the rest of the entire history of the human race. This presents school with a dilemma. The ability to harvest more data gives them the opportunity to record as much information as they want. However, due to the time-consuming nature of data collection, they often don't have the resources to manage the vast amount of data that's available. This leads to some of the data teachers track and input ending up being duplicative or unnecessary. The biggest challenge is reducing data management and breaking the habit. When reporting and data input has been done for so many years, it becomes second nature to teachers, even though it's time-consuming and it's not always beneficial. 3/4 of teachers believe they spend too much time on data management, a statistic that shows we really need to manage our data better in schools. So, how does data management impact on teacher workload? Outdated methods make data collection and management more time-consuming. When data collection hasn't been addressed in years, there are likely some bad habits present. Inefficient data collection and using outdated methods can make the systems teachers use sluggish and confusing. Next, collecting unneeded or unusable data creates meaningless tasks. Sometimes schools go overboard on data and much of it can't actually be used. If we don't recognise this, we'll continue to waste precious time collecting pointless information. At times, data is collected simply for the sake of collecting it. Sometimes schools do data collection because they believe they should. This could be an attempt to appease Ofsted or a misinformed area of school policy that needs to be updated. The same data is at times collected repeatedly for different purposes or audiences. Collecting the same data over and over again is pointless, as we all know. But schools do this all the time. Different departments collect the same data and spend time processing it without knowing that it already exists. And some technology purchased by schools creates more data management. Technology is great. It speeds up work that used to take an age to complete and gives us access to more information than we've ever had before. However, it can also make some processes much longer, where teachers are expected to input and collect data in order to make new software viable. If the point of education software is to make teachers' jobs easier and the school more efficient, then as soon as it begins to take up teacher time, the use of the software should be assessed and a decision should be made on whether it makes sense to continue using it. So, in light of this, how do we reduce the impact data management has on workload? The amount of data, its value, and the way in which it's collected needs to be assessed. Reducing the amount of data that you collect and how often you expect yourself and your staff to report on it will have an immediate impact on teacher workload. First of all, do audit the data you collect and assess its worth. By completing an audit of the data you currently collect, you can more easily assess its value, the frequency at which it's collected, and the reason for the collection. This audit will provide you with the information you need to help eliminate data collection which doesn't add value, saving teachers time instantly. We've included our own data collection audit template in the toolkit, which is a really good starting place for any school that's unsure of where to start with an audit. When conducting an audit, it may be helpful to have key members of SLT do this together so that the decisions you make are informed and fair. Next, we should debunk myths associated with data management. Some of the reasons for pointless data collection and hours spent collating data comes down to people conforming to myths surrounding Ofsted, which we're going to clear up now. First of all, Ofsted do not require data to be presented in a particular format. And secondly, Ofsted do not encourage multiple attainment data collection points through the year. This should be done only 2 or 3 times a year, and each of these collections should be used to inform clear actions. By understanding these myths and eliminating them from your data collection strategy, you can help to save you and your school time instantly. We should ensure data meets the requirements outlined by the Workload Advisory Group 2. When performing an audit of data collected or when deciding whether or not you should collect new data, be sure to refer to the following guidelines outlined by the Workload Advisory Group. This will help you to ascertain whether or not the data is worthwhile and ensure you only collect what's absolutely necessary. Excuse me. First of all, we need to look at the purpose. Ensure the use and purpose of data is in line with school values, is understood by all, and is relevant to its intended audience. Next, precision. Ensure the precision and limitations of data collected, as well as what can be inferred from it, are fully understood. Next, proportionate. Ensure the amount and frequency at which data is collected is proportionate to the effort that's required and the results that are then seen. And finally, processes. Ensure the processes for collecting data and the way in which data is used is reviewed and evaluated to ensure that it's as beneficial as possible. Ensure that the technology you use aids data management and doesn't add to it. Adopting new technologies that can streamline previously manual and arduous processes can help to reduce workload and save an inordinate amount of time. However, the implementation of such software needs to be savvy to ensure that the investment that you're making is actually reducing workload and not providing your staff with another way to input data. You can avoid this by fully investigating software that you buy before you buy it. It's also good practice to assess the current technology that you're using for data to see if there's still a need for it. Consider whether or not multiple pieces of software can be consolidated or if there's a better alternative. Key considerations should include: does the system write back? Can one system perform multiple functions we need? Is it easy to use? And does this serve a real purpose for my school? Satchel One automatically collects important data so that you don't have to. This means that statistics that are indicative of student progression surrounding inclusion, attendance, behaviour and homework hand-in rates are ready for you to use whenever you might need them. Curriculum planning is a topic of great discussion for education professionals. How should I mark? Should I mark at all? Am I marking wrong? There's no real right or wrong answer. So forming a planning structure can be difficult, often inefficient and overly time-consuming. By looking at curriculum planning and the way that we create lesson plans, teachers can reduce their workload significantly. Planning, preparation and analysis, or PPA, can eat up a lot of teachers' time, from writing up lesson plans to creating and searching for resources. Preparing curriculum plans and analysing their effectiveness helps schools to develop their teaching materials and assess how well teachers prepare. However, some schools expect more planning from their teachers than might actually be necessary. In fact, 56% of teachers feel that they spend too much time on planning and preparing for lessons. By making planning faster and more efficient, teacher workload can be significantly reduced. Misconceptions about Ofsted requirements and internal teacher assessments have caused many schools to focus too heavily on daily and weekly plans. This planning for the sake of planning approach is not helping our teachers or our students. It's helping to create a culture that obsesses over small details of teaching without allowing our teachers the room to be creative and really connect with students. So, we're going to look at the key issues that are impacting on teacher workloads when it comes to curriculum planning and resource creation. First of all, pressure from leadership resulting in overplanning. Teachers are sometimes encouraged to plan more than they might need to. This is often due to a better safe than sorry approach, but in reality this adds much more into a teacher's workload without necessarily benefiting the students. Sometimes this is encouraged by exterior pressures such as Ofsted anxiety or by the reading that teachers do outside of school. However, the pressure to plan often comes with the school's SLT, who seek to use lesson plans as a form of internal teacher assessment. Whilst this in itself isn't a problem, the more pressure we put on teachers to plan, the less time we are allowing them to really be creative. Teachers often plan outside of working hours. It's no secret that teachers often take their work home with them. They're known to plan during holidays, over the weekends, and often late into the night. Sometimes this is unavoidable, but schools should be taking steps to ensure that this is not normalised or made necessary. Creating and accessing high-quality resources is time-consuming. As teachers already spend all of this time planning, it leaves very little time for researching and finding high-quality lesson resources. This is a problem. The resources that teachers use are instrumental in the effectiveness of their lessons and the progress of their students. Some teachers even create their own resources that fit more closely with the curriculum and their lesson sequences. This can be great for student engagement and helps the teacher to fully tailor the lesson to their students. However, it's also something that teachers simply don't have the time for, and it wouldn't be required if high-quality resources were made readily available by the school in the first place. So, how do we reduce the impact of curriculum planning and resource creation on teacher workload? The key here is understanding how much time should be spent on these tasks, taking into consideration the effort versus the reward. Planning and resources are important parts of the teaching process. However, over-planning can be ineffective and there are an abundance of resources ready for teachers to use. They just need to be made accessible to them. First of all, we can prevent over-planning. Whilst curriculum planning is important, planning every single lesson isn't always the most effective approach. By taking a step back and planning a sequence of lessons for the month or term, teachers can slash planning time significantly. Lesson sequence planning can be split into smaller, logical modules that fit roughly into a daily or weekly plan if required, eliminating unnecessary workload around planning and teacher resources. There are no Ofsted regulations that specify a particular planning approach for teachers. Ofsted's priority is to ensure that teachers are progressing lessons in line with the curriculum and that students are making good progress. We've included a lesson sequence plan template in our toolkit for you to help shape your sequences. Facilitate collaborative planning. Allotting time for teachers to plan lessons together allows for a creative learning environment where teachers can learn from each other and work collaboratively. Additionally, pairing more experienced teachers with those who are new to the profession is a great learning opportunity. Under the government's directed time initiatives, teachers are entitled to 10% of their contracted work hours for PPA, and the school should set time aside for this. Regularly assess lesson plan protocol. School senior leadership often places pressure on teachers to complete lesson plans as a way of measuring performance and in a bid to achieve a higher Ofsted rating. However, Ofsted do not require daily or weekly lesson planning from a school for it to qualify as outstanding despite these common misconceptions. Instead, school leaders should look to emphasise the quality of lessons and work to assess teachers' performance in another way, for example through the use of student surveys. By regularly assessing policy surrounding lesson plans, SLT can ensure that teachers are planning effectively and performing to the best of their ability. Make quality assured content readily available to teachers. SLT should strive to provide teachers with access to quality resources so they don't have to spend time finding their own materials to use in class. By having a pre-selected library full of useful and relevant materials, teachers can save time in their busy schedule for more important aspects of the job. That's exactly what content in Satchel One does. By hosting Collins textbooks online, we're able to offer teachers instant access to an abundance of high-quality, curriculum-matched resources that are ready to set in class or as extended learning tasks for students. Schools rely on communication in its many forms to help maintain an environment where teachers are kept up to date, parents are always informed, and students have all the information they need to learn as effectively as possible. However, as most schools have many communication channels at their disposal, it can be very easy to overuse and overcomplicate internal and external communication. 82% of parents want schools to do more when it comes to keeping them informed about their child's progress. It's good practice to regularly assess communication policy to ensure that channels are being used efficiently and that time isn't being wasted on ineffective forms of communication. So, how does ineffective communication negatively impact on teacher workload? First of all, constant communication. With 24/7 access to emails, teacher workload has suffered and they are now unable to switch off from work. Constant access to communication can be damaging to teachers' mental health. Meetings with parents. Parents often find it hard to communicate with teachers or find the information that they're looking for. This means more time is wasted arranging meetings or speaking over the phone with parents. Pointless staff meetings. Long staff meetings increase teacher workload drastically. By having long, unregulated meetings, the school could be putting teaching quality at risk. And finally, the communication policy is not always clearly signposted. Not displaying the school's communication policy clearly via social media, email, and on the school website can lead to confusion and the need for teachers to explain the policy to parents. So, how do we reduce the impact of ineffective communication on teacher workload? Despite living in a world where communication is instant, we need to understand that this isn't always necessary or appropriate. Within schools, communication should be quick, to the point, and within working hours, and a streamlined approach to communication can help you achieve this. Safeguarding teachers' time. Teachers' workloads are already comprising of out-of-hours marking, planning, and resource creation. The last thing they need is extra emails to respond to as well. By introducing office hours, set times where teachers no longer receive or respond to emails, SLT can reduce teachers' out-of-hours workload where possible. Improve meetings. Meetings should also be regulated closely, taking care not to pull teachers into meetings that aren't actually relevant to them. This can be achieved by condensing less important discussion points into a staff email and making sure that meetings that do take place have a clear agenda that staff are aware of well in advance. Properly displaying school policy and resources. Ensuring that school policies are easy to access is paramount in saving staff time and effort, as well as improving parental engagement. By making it easier to access important documents such as school policies or permission slips, you can save teachers valuable time and allow parents to be more self-sufficient when gathering information. Writing notes for students, calling home, disciplining students, and having meetings with parents can all be reduced via clear presentation of school policy and resources, either on the school website or in a regular newsletter. Enforce a clear communication policy. It's important to regulate communication within your school to ensure all forms of communication are used professionally and are as effective as they can be. And, as with all school policies, it should be made easily accessible for all stakeholders via the school website. Our communication policy checklist is included in the toolkit you'll receive at the end of this webinar, and it's very helpful to use either when revising your current policy or starting a new one from scratch. Communication software. Embracing technology that opens up lines of communication between home and school can save teachers a lot of time. With Satchel One, parents are provided with a single app which gives them a full view of their child's timetable, attendance, behaviour points, upcoming events and homework tasks. Having access to all of this information allows schools to break down the communication barrier between home and school and instead encourages informed conversations around student progress. So, they were the 5 biggest contributors to excessive teacher workload in the UK. So before we wrap up, I wanted to provide you with a quick summary of everything that we covered today and the free resources that you will receive in your Reducing Teacher Workload Toolkit. First, we looked at behaviour, and from that section you have a behaviour policy checklist and a SEND help sheet, which will help you to enforce your school behaviour policy and be more aware of certain SEND characteristics. Second, we looked at marking and feedback, and to help with this area we've provided you with a template of a whole class feedback sheet to introduce you to a new marking technique that saves a huge amount of time. Next was data management, and to complement this section we've included a data collection audit template to help you analyse current data collection and a software audit checklist to help consolidate your current software. Following on from this, we had curriculum planning and resource creation, and we've gone ahead and included a lesson sequence plan template to help aid lesson planning. And finally, it was communication. And to help aid communication in your school, we've included our communication policy checklist. All of this is going to be included in your toolkit, which will be sent over to you shortly. I also just wanted to remind you of how Satchel One can help to aid you in reducing workload around these 5 key areas. First of all, behaviour. Behaviour is our centralised praise app, and it makes it really easy for teachers to reinforce positive behaviour from the front of the class, and standardised points supports praise in line with the school policy. Our seating app also supports behaviour, as a well thought out seating plan can help keep in-class distractions to a minimum. With our seating plans, you can view all necessary inclusion and attainment data to help make informed seating decisions. For marking and feedback, you can help take the strain out of marking homework. Teachers can set spelling tests and quizzes on Show My Homework, which are auto-graded for them. Data management. The beauty of Satchel One and all its apps is that data is tracked automatically for you, so you don't have to spend time collecting it for yourself. It's ready for you whenever you need it. With regards to curriculum planning and resource creation, as I mentioned earlier, we host all of Colin's textbooks online, so teachers don't have to spend time searching for curriculum matched content. It's ready for them to attach to the home learning tasks. Community resources in Show My Homework allows teachers access to thousands of homework tasks created by other teachers within the Satchel community, again ready to attach to a home learning task in seconds. And for communication, with Satchel One, all stakeholders have accounts, so important announcements can be delivered directly from the teacher to the student to the parent. Additionally, homework reminders for parents and students mean that everyone is kept in the loop with no confusion. And remember that Satchel One offers you all of this functionality from the ease of one login on one user-friendly platform. If you're interested in finding more about any of the Satchel One apps, get in touch today via the website or by replying to the email that you'll receive shortly. So that's everything for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it really helpful and useful. Please do remember to check out our YouTube channel. You'll find our previous webinars in there. We have one on effective classroom management and another one on successful homework. Please do also check out our blog and our resources centre. This is regularly updated with education news and content. And by all means, please do give us a follow on social media. This is where you can keep up to date with us and let us know what you want to hear from us next as well. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure. Bye.